make plosive sounds.
With these mics.
Yeah.
Those are pretty soft.
Like if you did that into an SM57,
oh, yeah,
it's over.
Yeah. Interesting.
Anyway, we're starting.
Okay. On that note.
Engineering 101.
Start by making plosives into the mic.
Try it.
Just see what it's
Your audience will love it. This is Chris Schlarb. I'm here with one of my oldest and best friends, Tabor Allen.
Hello.
Tabor, you were born in March of 1989, if I remember correctly.
That's correct, yeah.
What sign is that? What sign are you?
That's that would be a Pisces.
That's right.
Yeah. That's me.
I was reading your bio, and it said that you were abandoned at Pro Drum in Hollywood as an infant, and raised by nothing but a pack of wild drummers. Is that true?
It's true, yeah.
Okay,
it's true.
No wonder.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense.
Sort of like, imagine like Mowgli from the Jungle Book.
That's exactly.
It's like a bunch of like John Bonhams and Keith Moons.
Right. Anybody who would pass through Pro Drum would suckle you and teach you paradiddle routines.
It's an amazing way to grow up, really.
I mean, now, and look at you now. Drummer to the stars.
Still suckling.
And being the suckler on occasion. So, I don't know. We've known each other for 12, 13, 14, I don't remember how many years. You were 17
Yeah.
when we met?
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I'm very bad at math, so how old are you now?
29.
So
Yeah.
is that 12 years?
That's 12 years.
Okay, well, we got down to the bottom of that quickly.
Problem solved.
So 17, we met through, the way that I look at it is we met through avant-garde and underground legend Sean Carnage.
That's right.
He and I had done a movie together previously called 40 Bands in 80 Minutes, and then he was hired, I think perhaps on the kind of the strength of that film, to do another movie called Friends in Other Dimensions, which I don't think ever came out.
No.
But it had like an unbelievable array of people. So I was hired to do sound for that. And we did like one day or a weekend or something at Pear Space where I recorded like Ty Segall and Juicebox and I don't know, a ton of people. I can't remember.
Probably Health and
Health.
Maybe No Age or something.
Something like that.
Sure.
And then there was like a couple of makeup dates for other bands.
Yeah.
And your band, your 17-year-old band, the Widow Babies.
Yeah.
Was such a band.
Yeah. Yes. Well, we got asked to do it as a replacement because one of the bands that were going to do it just broke up suddenly.
Okay.
I think they were called Silver Daggers. And it's one of the great and beautiful things about the music scene is like serendipitous stuff like this where no one has ever seen that movie.
Right. And
like
they may never.
It's a long forgotten memory for both of us.
Right.
But this is how we met.
Right. And so in the intervening 12 years, we've probably worked on 100 things together.
Yeah.
At
Easily.
least.
Yeah. Definitely. Where we actually shot the thing though, I remember was the Vermont shoe store.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's where it was.
Totally.
Which I feel like I heard later that it caved in or something.
It was like in some weird like upper room.
Yes.
You guys were all, smashed together. Widow Babies pretty much was always a 4-piece.
Yes,
right.
it was.
So it was you and Dambo.
Yes.
On guitar and Elise on vocal.
Yes.
And was it Neil?
Neil, yeah,
on
our bass player.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bunch of kids from the Orange County.
So you guys played one of the Mike Watt tunes, I think.
Correct.
And then I weaseled my way into producing the Mike Watt
I don't know why that idea intrigued you or anyone, but we had written an EP, a concept EP,
right,
as like a mini rock opera about Mike Watt, and
it's funny to talk about this shit all these years later.
I know.
Right? Because there was a period of time where like that was like a lot of what we were working on.
Right. Yes. And Mike Watt was in like a battle for the soul of the universe with a vampire Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
And
so we're starting with good bones.
Yeah,
you know?
I know. But nowadays the idea, like, I hope that if some 17-year-old kid came up to me today and said that he was working on a rock opera about Mike Watt, I would also have the wherewithal to be like, hey, I want to work on that too.
Totally.
Because I'm a little surprised that you did, to be honest.
Yeah, me too, now that I think of it. I think, here's the thing. At the moment, because I came to that recording session, I had no idea who you guys are. I'm literally just doing it because Sean is saying, like, hey, I can pay you, like $100
yeah,
or something.
We didn't get paid at all.
Yeah,
so.
Maybe I didn't either. Maybe I was making that up. But it was sort of like, there was a kind of like workman, sort of like, this is my job. I can do a good job. I've got a portable rig. I'll record these kids. And what I came away from was just thinking like, damn, like this music rips. It's got a lot of energy. It's fun. It had this kind of like Afro beat meets like Deerhoof kind of like meets kind of sort of weirdo kind of angle to it. And it was like punk music too. Right. And I didn't work on music like that in general, per se. I think sometimes I look back at my own discography and I'm like, oh, this shit is kind of like linear in some strange ways. It has these bizarre like detours, but there is a kind of like reversion to the mean of like what I like.
Sure.
So we did the Mike Watt EP at Matt Wignall's house in his side garage where like Cold War Kids and all these other folks have recorded over the years, and
which was like life changing for us. Right. It really was. Even getting asked to do the Sean thing, the movie, we were just these kids from OC that desperately wanted to be part of like the very cool LA music scene.
Yeah.
And I feel like getting invited first to be part of, because we of course knew about 40 bands in 80 minutes and we knew all of those bands and we played at the Smell and we wanted to be a part of that. And so even getting asked to do that and then meeting you randomly, who was like the first person ever that was like, I'll record that.
Yeah.
Like, well, let's do a record.
Yeah, and see, and now you know me well enough to know that that's basically just my default lifestyle choice.
Yeah, yes. And
hi, what's your name?
Yeah,
hey, let's do a record.
I know. And I realize now too that I think part of what has brought both of us along this journey for so long is that we're both inclined to just say yes to almost anything.
It's true. Yeah.
And which I'm sure has caused us as much misery as it has pleasure.
No doubt.
But
you can't separate the bitter from the sweet.
No,
though.
but like we had no idea who you were, and you were just like, "I'll record you," and we were like, "Yes."
Yeah.
And I feel like getting anything done and meeting anyone and making any kind of opportunity happen. In some ways, you have to just like not ask too many questions. A little bit, like.
Now, see, this is the interesting thing because the cynic would say, well, that's how musicians are taken advantage of, right? That's how artists are manipulated because they're so eager.
Right.
And they'll just do anything, and people with untoward intentions will lead them astray or exploit them. But sometimes, I don't know, I guess it depends on where you are and also what type of music you're working on.
Yeah.
That seems much more plausible if you're working on bad commercial music.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of sharks in that sea.
Sure.
I mean, there are some in the world that we live in too. There are creeps like everywhere.
Of course.
I tend to think of like, if you're talking about jazz, avant, punk, some of these kind of like sub genres that are not part of like mainstream culture, a lot of the folks involved in that are clearly doing it because they love the art form.
Right.
And I think it's a self-selecting group.
Yeah. And I think what you're talking about being taken advantage of, I think that's in the minority of circumstances.
I do too, yeah.
I really do. I can't help but feel like, well, just take that example. Like, we're some 17-year-old kids from Orange County. No one's ever offered to record us. We don't really know anything about recording. We have like this dream of doing this like weird record that like it takes a very specific kind of person to be enthusiastic about in the first place. And if we had just said, oh, we don't know who this guy Chris is, like, whatever, let's not do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, I feel like a whole world of a lifetime of opportunities and stuff wouldn't have happened. And
for both of us,
yes,
ironically.
Yeah, exactly.
So we made the Mike Watt EP. It was one of the last records that Sounds Are Active put out.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Then we kind of pretty quickly went back and made Jetpacks. I don't think it was too long. It was a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, it was like immediately we started working on another thing.
Jetpacks we did a little bit differently. It was a bit more of like a Fleetwood Mac recording process, where it's kind of like bit by bit, place by place. I seem to remember we did one session somewhere where we have photos of it, and I don't know, I think we did Elisa's vocals there or something, but it was like in some like office in a warehouse building or something.
For the life of me, I've never been able to remember where that was either. I think it was like in the South Bay somewhere, or Lakewood, or somewhere weird. I don't know, somewhere random. Don't know how we ended up there.
Me neither. It was like something having to do with like Neil's family or something.
Yeah, that seems possible.
So we did Jetpacks. And Jim Smith from The Smell put it out on his label.
Yeah, on Olfactory.
Right.
Where it still exists and is in print.
Yeah. Today.
Yes.
Like 10 years later or something.
Yes.
From that point, the band breaks up.
Correct.
Widow Babies breaks up.
Yeah.
You and Danny then, I seem to remember I guess maybe I in trying to tell the story, because there's a lot of story left to tell.
Sure.
I skipped over the part of the Mike Watt EP album release party, but that is kind of an extremely important part of of our lives.
Yeah.
Strangely.
Well, I think because that was this moment where I think you and I both started to realize, like, we have these people that we look up to, that we revere musically, philosophically, whatever, and if you just reach out to them, a lot of them will say yes.
Right.
And we got Mike Watt in his duo with Kira Rosler,
right, Dose,
to come and play the album release for the Mike Watt EP.
Right.
And it was like a dream come true for us.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, we're playing with our hero.
So I have a strange kind of like memory of how that came together, because in planning for it, I was in Austin for some reason. And I think maybe I was working like a rare book auction or playing a show. I don't know. Who knows what I was doing out there. But I remember I sent Nels Klein an email, and I said, hey, Nels, I just did this record for this group, the Widow Babies. It's an album. It's called the Mike Watt EP. I told him the concept. At the time, I didn't know Watt. And the thought was like, well, we got to get him to play the show. And then within, half an hour or something, Nels sends me an email back with Watt's email. And then I email Watt, and then he emails me back, like, just a few minutes later. So I remember at one point, like, looking at my phone, and like it was back-to-back messages from like Nels Klein and Mike Watt. And I was just like, what world am I living in where I'm just like talking to these guys as like some sort of like peer. Obviously I wasn't, and I still would hesitate to say that, but to just like,
I think they would disagree with you, but
I felt a lot of grace.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, wow, like these guys didn't have to do any of this. So Watt plays the gig, and there are still these apocryphal photographs of like the entire Widow Babies band sitting around him, like the Sermon on the Mount, you know?
It's true, just like worshiping, like in a still life, like a medieval still life.
Yeah, like eating gummy bears or something.
Yeah.
And so we play the gig with Watt.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. You just reminded me of like he brought those.
The gummy bears. Yeah.
Watt had them like in his back pocket. And he was like giving us
handing
candy.
them out.
Like, and of course, you know, he's like the guy with the big van too.
Right.
It's like,
yeah.
it's like out of some like fucking horror movie.
So
only it's Mike Watt.
Yeah. So he plays the gig, and then we just basically, you know, we start becoming friends.
Right.
The band breaks up. You, Dambo, and I go have like Hole Mole for lunch.
Yeah.
And you're saying, hey, we're working on some new stuff.
Yeah.
And I think at some point I say, well, you guys don't have a bass player anymore. Why don't we ask Watt to play bass?
Right.
And that became the cause for concern. Rare 7-inch.
Yeah, exactly. And that was just like yet another realization, I think, for both of us too, because that was like you also as a producer putting together a session where we get some of our icons to come and record with us, and it was like it was surreal almost.
Totally.
When Watt walked into the studio. It was just like, and of course there's a lot of like funny details about that whole session and that whole day.
Yeah.
But the one that I'll actually commit to tape was that he left without saying goodbye.
Totally.
So
yeah.
we recorded all day long.
Yeah.
And we kind of sort of wrapped up, and we were sort of finished with the day. And
I don't know if we were like back, like listening to playback or something.
I think we
went back out into the live room, and it was just gone.
He was gone.
Yeah.
No goodbye.
Yeah.
Just like Watt just disappeared.
Yeah.
Like you know.
No, gentlemen, I if you'll excuse me.
Yeah, no, just gone. Just gone. So that was incredible. What a way to like leave a session. I've since then always dreamed of doing that myself, and
it is kind of the baller move.
I know I haven't ever quite worked myself up to it, but to me the idea that like we could rap and I could just like leave without saying anything to anyone.
Yeah, no one would think twice.
Right.
For me, since I'm the one who like called him for the session, I was just like, oh shit, did he like not have a good time? But then I had to remember. What I remembered about it was there were 3 songs that we were trying to cut.
Right.
If I remember correctly.
There were.
And this for the 7-inch. And we, you know, if I remember right, there was a moment where we kind of went outside and Watt starts like writing down the chord changes. Dambo's there with his acoustic guitar and just kind of like singing the tunes.
Right.
And Watt's writing down like, you know, his Watt chart.
Yeah.
You know. And we get back into the studio, start cutting it, and then it's like, nope, let's do it again. You know, we get a take, we move on to the next song. Okay, let's do it again. Okay, we got a take, let's move on to the next song. Go through it a few times, and then Watt was like, let's go back to the first song again.
Right.
And we cut that one, and that was the new master take.
Yes.
And then he goes, well, let's do the second song again. And then we did that, and then that was the new master take. And then he's like, let's do the third song again. We do that, and then that. Like, so we did all 3 songs, like, throughout the day. And then at the very end, like, Watt's kind of, you know, his angle, his feeling on it was like, we got to do them all over again now.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, of course. I totally remember that.
And that's kind of the thing that stuck with me after when he left early, because I thought nobody does that doesn't care.
Yeah.
So him leaving and not saying goodbye, it was maybe just like my first realization that, like, you know, this is just the man that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't. It was like, it's not us.
No. No, definitely not.
And then he ended up sending me an email that night, and he was like, sorry, I had to leave. Sorry, I left without saying goodbye. I had to go off to rehearse another gig or play a show or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Well, and you realize like that's just Watt.
Right.
That's who he is.
Yeah.
Another quirk of that session was that he showed up thinking that we were going to write music together.
That's right.
And not realizing at all that we had already written songs.
Yeah, for him to play.
Yeah.
He thought it was going to be like an improv sesh, kind of writing session, recording thing.
So we threw a little like surprise his way early on.
That wouldn't be the first or the last time
No.
that there was some sort of confusion. So we do the Rare Grooves Cause for Concern 7-inch. Then what starts happening after that? Then it's more Rare Groove stuff.
Yeah. Well, okay. I think it's worth noting here that this is around the time that Psychic Temple started.
That's right. Yeah. So that'd be like 2010.
Yeah.
Or
right.
So.
Yeah.
That's when the first record came out, I think.
Yeah. I think we had probably known each other for like 3 years at that point. And had done various recording projects together.
And you and Danbo were on the first Psychic Temple record.
Right. Well, so that's you. At that point, you called us one night, and we're like, "What are you doing?" It was like 10 o'clock at night. And you're just like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, and I had never heard. I don't think Psychic Temple was named.
Right.
I think it was like unnamed new Schlarb project.
Yeah.
And you called us, and we were like, nothing. And you're like, well, come on into the studio.
At like 10 o'clock.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. And we were like stoked. It was like, okay, we'll come into the studio. And so we come in, and you have this like track going that it's like this ambient track, and there's like all this stuff happening, and you're like, this song needs like a kick drum. It needs like a beat, and I need you to play the kick drum.
Yeah.
So we set it up, and that was my first contribution to Psychic Temple, was just to play a kick drum for a minute and a half.
That's got to be
like a steady tempo.
The beginning of the Daughters of Ursa Major or something, I think.
Or Dream State Police State.
Police State. That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Is the beginning of Dream State Police State. And it was a totally kind of amorphous project at this point. Like you were just gathering material.
And I think then I had Danbo and I ended up playing those lead electric parts for I Can Live Forever If I Slowly Die.
Right.
Maybe that same
I
day.
think absolutely that
night.
same. Yeah, right? Totally. And that was it.
It's a fever dream.
Yeah, and
the
that
whole
was
thing.
yeah, and that was the beginning. And that's also what I remember as the beginning of Psychic Temple.
Right. So so this is 2010. So what else is going on around then? I'm trying to think of of all these progressions of things that you've been involved with, because Rare Grooves then sort of like we were just talking about, we ended up doing that that sort of aborted session not too long after.
Right.
And then Rare Grooves kind of forms into like Wide Streets.
Right, exactly. We met our friend Jet while we were working as security guards at the Norton Simon Museum.
Right. I remember that. I remember that.
That was like a funny period. And this is DIY music, man. We all have day jobs and have done every random thing you can imagine. Okay, which also, this segues to like another important aspect of our relationship, which is we both worked as truck drivers for an organic produce delivery company for years.
Spud.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which I swear to God, you got like every musician in Long Beach a job there at one point or another.
I tried my best.
It was like a revolving door of like broke ass musicians coming through. And like, hey, you need a job? Can you drive a truck?
It's a great job for a musician, man.
It was awesome.
I remember when I went to go talk at Cal State Long Beach, and I'm talking to their composition students, and I was like, hey, one of the best pieces of advice I could give you is get a manual labor job. And these kids looked at me like
they were college kids, man.
Yeah. They didn't want to hear that.
No, they didn't want to hear that.
But it's true. Like, man, how many songs do we write out driving a truck? I mean, like, I probably wrote like hundreds of songs, hundreds of melodies, lyrics.
Just having that job to go to, it wasn't like mentally demanding.
Right.
It was like that kind of I don't know. I feel like it's not a job that even is going to exist for that much longer in this world.
Well, now that, I do feel like in a way like we got out at the right time.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like it was like a sweet spot kind of job.
Yeah.
We didn't have GPS tracking us.
So that's what I was going to say. The sweet spot was that there was no oversight of what we were doing. So if there was a little break in the middle of the day to visit a couple of record stores.
Yeah, or a thrift shop.
Yeah.
Dude,
yeah.
I must have picked so much shit up off the side of the road. I picked up a beautiful like wooden like cedar desk one time, and I was like, I have a van.
Yeah.
Here it is on the side of the road.
Yeah. I mean, it was the kind of job where like you could like pull off at a beautiful park and like take a little nap and, like,
did it
and get back to work a half an hour later, and like nobody was gonna be any the wiser.
See, this is the thing, man. Though that's like that's like part of why I was there for like 12 years or whatever. It's like I had time to think.
Right.
I had time for myself. What I was trying to tell those students is like, if you get a job, if you get a manual labor job, your mind is yours. If you get a desk job, your mind is what is being paid for.
Right.
And that's the thing that I don't think a lot of creative people can afford to give away if they can help it.
Oh yeah, well you're taking it home with you, and like time that should be spent. I had no problem at all. I mean, for years I did this. Worked, drove the truck, delivered all day, got off, went to do a rehearsal with some band, went to some gig later that night, got up and did it again the next day. It was easy.
Yeah.
And this, like, just like to bring it back to the Minutemen, it's like I think about those guys working at the docks in Pedro.
Right.
And and they were like a working class band. That was what they did. They played music at night. I remember hearing at one point about the Minutemen that they made all their concerts start early, so that like working people could go to them, because you know how it is in LA.
Right.
Says it's going to start at 10, really starts at 11.
Yeah.
Band that you're there to see that. And yeah, if you're like a working person, you can't go see shows like that on a weeknight.
Right.
And so I think they instituted like a 7 p.m. strict start time for their shows, so that people who had real jobs could come out and see them.
Yeah. And young people. Yeah. Right? Because young people are going to have a hard time staying out too late as well if they got a curfew, or like parents are saying you got to be home by 9 or 10 or whatever.
And there's this really ridiculous stigma, I think, especially in Los Angeles, where we're all so obsessed with appearances, about being like a working person and a musician, a working person and an artist.
It took me a long time to like be comfortable with it.
Right.
Even myself.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a dad working a full-time job and trying to do music and trying to figure out like, well, what's real? I mean, this is real, but how do I communicate this in a way that's honest and doesn't seem exploitative either way? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I think that there's this obsession with, I don't want to have another job, or I don't want to work, or I just want music to be my job. And it's like, that's great and that's a dream, but like, how many people do we know that are incredible gifted musicians that like at various points in their careers, they've all worked.
Right.
They've all
There's
had
certainly
day
no
jobs.
shame in
No.
that. Yeah, but there is a stigma about like you should be, if you were good enough.
Yes, yeah. Or
you shouldn't have to have a day job.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you don't believe in it.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like, and that was something that like, I feel like from the beginning with Psychic Temple and with our project, like we worked at a job together in addition to playing in a band together. And that's always been important to me.
I used to think all the time when I was out driving about like Philip Glass being a taxi driver in his like 40s or something, you know?
Yes.
And I know that that's almost like a trope now. Like everybody knows like, oh, right, yes, he was, you know. But I'm like, yeah, dude, but that's like real life, man.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you know, Phil's worked hard and he deserves the success that he's had. But there are probably dozens and dozens of Lyft or Uber or taxi or truck drivers out there who are like incredibly talented and are just trying to make ends meet and, you know, maybe don't have the connections or don't live in a big city or, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, having a passion for music just doesn't guarantee you any kind of economic success.
Oh, I'm shocked by this revelation.
Look, Chris, I don't mean to. I know you're young and naive, and you have your whole life ahead of you. But I know.
Give me a minute to process this.
I know your dream is.
Oh man, I thought if I just loved music enough, I wouldn't have to do anything else.
Some people would just start giving you money.
That doesn't happen. That's what you're saying. So we're doing Psychic Temple.
Right.
I feel like not too long after we started maybe working on like How a Man is Made.
Yeah.
Around that time.
Yeah, and like, okay, since you're having a conversation with me, I think also at this point, I just start playing in every band that'll have me.
I was going to get to this. I'm glad you brought it up, because one of the things that I was thinking about a lot was around this time, you and Danny and Grant moved into the house in Alhambra,
Yeah,
right? And it sort of became this like little artist's utopia in a strange way.
Yeah.
From the outside, for me.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We tried. That's what we were going for.
And that's, maybe a lot of people don't know, but the cover of Psychic Temple 3 is looking out that window down the hill of your living room.
Yes.
Those are the windows of your living room.
Yeah. Well, it was like this beautiful little house in the suburbs, and we were all kind of going to school, them more seriously than me, but there's something about living in the suburbs where there's nothing going on, so you really are left to create your own excitement.
Yeah.
And I feel like we used that house as just a constant springboard for creativity, it was a very fertile period in all of our friendships, and we constantly made music, we made movies, we did everything that we could, really using the house as a creative force for all of us. And we didn't party or I don't know, it was this it was what you said. It was like a weird little artist utopia.
Yeah.
And we just existed out in the burbs and out in random Alhambra. We had no neighbors. We could make as much noise as we want. It was a weird.
You guys had paint